Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper. The central government has informed the Supreme Court that it is planning to bring in a law to tackle the problem of air pollution in the Delhi NCR region by checking the practice of stubble burning in the neighbouring states of Punjab and Haryana. The practice of stubble burning is widely prevalent in Punjab and Haryana because it is the most preferred crop residue management technique. At the end of the Kharif season, the paddy crop is harvested and this leaves behind a residue in the field in the form of a stubble. And these stubbles will have to be cleared in order to prepare the agricultural field for the next cropping season, that is the Rabi season. In the Rabi season, that is the winter season, winter crops such as wheat is cultivated, and for sowing wheat, the agricultural field has to be prepared and the remaining stubble left behind by the paddy crop during the Kharif season has to be cleared. So since the time available between the Kharif and the Rabi season is very less, farmers look for a faster and cheaper method through which they can clear the field in order to eliminate the crop residue. Compared to mechanical removal of the stubble, farmers find it much easier to burn the residue, and hence they set vast agricultural fields on fire in order to burn out the stubble, because for them this happens to be the fastest and the cheapest method. So such large-scale burning of the stubble releases huge quantities of particulate matter and other air pollutants into the air, and under the action of wind currents, this particulate matter finally ends up reaching the Delhi NCR region, thereby contributing significantly to air pollution and smog formation in this area during the winter season. Over the years, to prevent the harmful impact of stubble burning, a number of steps have been taken by the central government and as well as by the respective state governments, but unfortunately none of them have yielded permanent results. For example, with the support of the central government, the state government has tried to encourage the adoption of mechanized harvesting during the Kharif season so that mechanized farming equipment such as combine harvesters can be adopted by the farmers, which cuts the paddy crop very close to the ground and hardly leaves behind any residue. Then the state government has also taken up a number of measures in order to promote greater awareness amongst the farmers with regard to the environmental impact of stubble burning. For this purpose, the government of Punjab has appointed nodal officers at the village level so that they can encourage the farmers to adopt environment-friendly on-site management techniques of the stubble. Then to deter the farmers from resorting to stubble burning, the state governments have even imposed fines on the farmers as directed by the judiciary, but none of these measures have yielded any lasting results. Along with this, the central government and the state governments have provided a number of subsidies and as well as incentives to discourage the farmers from resorting to stubble burning, to encourage the adoption of mechanized harvesting so that stubble burning can be eliminated. Then even the Supreme Court has taken a set of measures on its own, and as we have discussed over the last few weeks, it has appointed the Environment Pollution Prevention and Control Authority to implement the Graded Response Action Plan that tackles air pollution in the Delhi NCR region. But however, the EPCA constituted by the Supreme Court does not have the authority to tackle stubble burning in neighbouring Punjab and Haryana, and for this purpose, just last week, the Supreme Court had constituted a one-man committee under the chairmanship of Justice Madan B. Lokar. This one-man committee had been directed by the Supreme Court to take measures to prevent stubble burning in Punjab and Haryana by taking the help of student volunteers from the NCC, the NSS and Scouts and Guides, so that air pollution in the Delhi NCR region could be tackled effectively during the winter season. But in yesterday's hearing, the Supreme Court has decided to put this committee on hold for the time being because the centre has assured the Supreme Court that it is going to bring in a new law in the form of an ordinance in order to check stubble burning in Punjab and Haryana. This proposed law might bring in a fresh set of provisions in order to deter farmers in Punjab and Haryana from carrying out stubble burning, and it might give more powers to the state governments and to the local authorities. But however, experts have pointed out that this approach of the centre is flawed on two grounds. One, until now, the centre has not carried out any consultation with all the concerned stakeholders, especially with the Ministry of Agriculture, because any adverse provisions in such a law would end up directly affecting the well-being of the farmers. In fact, the centre has taken everyone by surprise because most of them were not aware of the centre's proposal to bring in a new law that is dedicated to tackle stubble burning. If the center is contemplating such a law, then there has to be widespread consultation that includes concerned ministries such as the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Environment and Forest, and as well as the state governments, and more importantly, the civil society, farmers' organizations, and environmental conservation groups. But until now, there has been no such consultation carried out by the centre. But to everyone's surprise, the centre has informed the Supreme Court that such an ordinance has already been readied, and very soon this shall be brought out by the government as a law. So this unilateral approach of the centre has raised few concerns amongst experts, and they have also pointed out that the need of the hour is not a new law but better enforcement, especially at the local level. Environmental experts have pointed out that there are already sufficient legal provisions available to effectively tackle stubble burning. But what is needed is better enforcement by the state governments and especially by the local authorities. So they are asking the centre to further support the state governments to promote the adoption of mechanized harvesting and to extend the provision of subsidies and incentives, accompanied with strict enforcement of the ban on stubble burning at the local level, instead of bringing in new laws which is only bound to create more confusion. Now let's take up the next article that deals with the ongoing India-US 2+2 dialogue. It has been reported that India is going to sign the BECA agreement, which is the last of the remaining 4 foundational agreements of the United States. BECA stands for Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement for Geospatial Cooperation or Geospatial Intelligence. And this was the last out of the 4 foundational agreements that is required by the US for greater defense cooperation, which was yet to be signed by India. So it has been reported that at today's 2+2 dialogue, India will finally sign the last of the remaining 4 foundational agreements, that is BECA. So before we look at this article in greater detail, first let's understand what are the 4 foundational agreements. See, the United States prescribes that any country which is seeking a close military alliance and military cooperation with the United States, that country has to sign the 4 foundational agreements prescribed by the United States in order to promote greater cooperation and interoperability. Basically, these 4 foundational agreements, they provide a framework for such close cooperation between the armed forces of the United States and the armed forces of friendly nations, and it also helps promote interoperability amongst these forces. These are more of routine agreements that close allies of the US have already signed, and in fact, the US has already entered into more than 100 such agreements. Close allies of the US, such as the NATO countries and even several non-NATO members, have already signed these 4 foundational agreements with the US in order to promote greater defense cooperation and interoperability amongst their forces. These 4 agreements include the General Security of Military Information Agreement or GSOMIA, the Logistics Exchange Memorandum of Agreement or the LEMOA, Communications and Information Security Memorandum of Agreement or the CISMOA, and finally the BECA, which stands for Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement for Geospatial Intelligence. See, prior to 2001, India did not have a close defense relationship with the US, mainly because of mutual suspicion and lack of trust that dated back to the Cold War era. But after the 9/11 attacks and following the US invasion of Afghanistan and the simultaneous rise of India as a major regional power, the US started seeking closer defense relations with India, and considering the rising influence and threat posed by China, it was also in India's interest to start cultivating close defense relations with the United States. So as India-US pursued a closer defense relationship post-2001, the United States mandated that India has to sign these 4 foundational agreements so that greater cooperation and interoperability could be promoted amongst their armed forces. But initially, India was very hesitant to sign these 4 foundational agreements because as a result of the Cold War hangover, India felt that by signing these agreements, India would be compromising its national sovereignty and the security of its critical defense assets. But with the gradual improvement of India-US relations and with the gradual build-up of trust and confidence in the relationship, India started to sign these agreements one by one. In 2002, India first signed the General Security of Military Information Agreement, which allows the armed forces of India and US to share military-related intelligence. Then, after many years of hesitation, India finally signed the LEMOA in 2016, which allows both the countries to have access to each other's military facilities such as naval bases, primarily for refueling and resupplies. LEMOVA provides for logistics exchange and increases the operational reach of both the armed forces. Then the third agreement, that is the SISMOA, basically provides for the transfer of highly sensitive encrypted communication systems from the United States to the partner country. This will facilitate seamless cooperation and promote interoperability amongst the two armed forces. It also makes the exchange of any sensitive information between the two sides highly secure. And in 2018, the India-specific version of SISMOA, that is the COMCASA, was signed. So the signing of the COMCASA has allowed the United States to sell highly encrypted communication systems to India, which will be installed on the defense platforms that India has procured from the US, such as the C-130J Super Hercules aircraft, the C-17 Globemaster, and the P-8I Poseidon, etc. After signing these three agreements out of the four foundational agreements, India was expected to sign the last remaining agreement, that is the BECA, or the Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement for Geospatial Intelligence. This agreement provides for the exchange of geospatial data and satellite data, which helps in navigation and as well as in accurate targeting of weapons. But due to concerns related to India's sovereignty, security issues and operational constraints, India was still hesitant to sign BECA. And finally, India has reportedly made a decision to sign the BECA agreement with the United States today at the ongoing 2+2 dialogue. So the signing of all the four foundational agreements will bring India and US much closer in the defense domain and promote greater cooperation and interoperability amongst the armed forces of both the sides. Apart from the signing of the BECA, the defense and foreign ministers of both the sides will be focusing on four primary themes. This includes promotion of regional security cooperation, defense information sharing, promotion of greater military-to-military interactions through joint exercises and training, and finally, enhanced focus on defense trade in order to promote the export and transfer of technology of defense equipment from the US to India. This high-level interaction comes at a time when both India and US are looking at China as a major security challenge in the Indo-Pacific region, and it follows the decision of India to elevate the trilateral Malabar exercise to the quadrilateral exercises involving Australia as well. Plus, India is looking to procure a number of advanced defense equipment from the US, and it signifies the growing defense relationship between the two countries. So in this backdrop, the four leaders at the 2+2 dialogue will focus on various issues such as promoting military-to-military cooperation, enhancing the establishment of secure communication systems between the two sides in order to promote the secure exchange of military information and defense intelligence between the two sides. The focus on securing information sharing highlights the extent of cybersecurity cooperation between the two sides, and it also highlights the advanced nature of ties between India and US in the defense domain. So as discussed, the focus of the 2+2 dialogue will be on promoting defense trade, ironing out industrial issues in the defense sector, which is hampering defense trade between India and US, and they will also discuss mutual security concerns, especially in Asia and the Indo-Pacific, including the ongoing Afghan peace process and the threat posed by China to the interests of India and US in the Indo-Pacific region. India would also like to discuss the issue of Pakistan's sponsorship of terrorism, because it would expect the United States to make use of its unique leverage against Pakistan to put diplomatic pressure in order to put an end to its state sponsorship of terrorism. Apart from this, India and US are also going to discuss the issue of deploying liaison officers at critical defense facilities of each other. India has already posted a naval officer as a liaison officer at the Central Command of the US Navy headquartered in Bahrain, which primarily takes care of US operations in the West Asia Middle East region. So now the US is expecting India to post liaison officers at the Indo-Pacific Command of the US Navy and as well as at the US Special Operations Command. Similarly, the US is also deploying its liaison officers at Indian military facilities such as the Indian Ocean Fusion Center, which provides for an integrated picture of maritime traffic across the Indian Ocean region, which is picked up by India's Coastal Surveillance Radar project. Now let's take up a column from page number 6, which analyzes the foreign policy approach of India and China towards the strategically important West Asia region. See, the West Asia region is quite a complicated region diplomatically because of numerous conflicts and rivalries that are going on in the region. In West Asia, you have the existence of three power poles led by regional powers such as Saudi Arabia, Iran and Israel. Saudi Arabia and Iran share a great deal of rivalry against each other because while Saudi Arabia represents the Sunni power bloc, Iran represents the Shia power bloc. For decades, these two power blocs have been waging a covert war against each other in order to establish their dominance and supremacy in the region. Then you have Israel, which is seen as another major power in the West Asia region. In the initial years, the Israel-Palestine conflict had turned all the Arab states against Israel. But over the years, due to changing geopolitical circumstances, Saudi Arabia became a close ally of the United States. And the US has pushed both Saudi Arabia and Israel to set aside their rivalry and establish a covert relationship with greater strategic alignment that helps them to jointly tackle the threat posed by Iran. Basically, the selective targeting of Iran by the United States has brought the US, the Saudi Arabia-led power bloc and Israel under one alliance that is jointly seeking to target Iran and its influence in the West Asia region. These regional rivalries has led to the formation of multiple power poles in the region, and dealing with such a conflict-hit region becomes very complicated for any external power such as India and as well as China. See, traditionally, both India and China have been heavily dependent on the West Asia region for ensuring their energy security. Because just like India, even China is a net importer of oil, and the majority of supplies for both the countries comes from West Asian countries. So this criticality of the West Asian countries to their energy security had pushed both India and China to adopt a non-aligned passive role, and both had carefully chosen not to take any sides in this regional conflict amongst the three powers, and they were seen to be pursuing a policy of strategic autonomy in order to maintain independent relations with all the three power blocs. Over the years, both India and China were very careful to not step into these regional issues, and they continued to maintain independent relations with all the powers in the region, primarily to ensure their energy security and protect other core national interests. In fact, the economic and energy interests of India and China were so similar in the West Asia region that recently there was even a proposal to establish an importers OPEC comprising of major importers of West Asian oil, especially rising Asian economies, so that they could express their concerns together and act as a pressure group, similar to how major oil producers, especially from the West Asia region, have established the OPEC in order to determine production, supply and thereby the global oil prices. But over the last few years, this common outlook of India and China towards West Asia has undergone a drastic change. The changing economic necessities of India and China and the growing rivalry between India and China, especially the latest border tensions and clashes, and as well as the emergence of a new Cold War between China and US, has led to transformational changes in their policy towards the West Asia region. For example, India, which was traditionally striking a diplomatic balance between the three powers of West Asia, has started to align more closely towards Saudi Arabia, UAE and Israel. Especially under the Modi government, India's ties with Saudi Arabia and UAE have improved significantly because these West Asian powers have already realized the limitations of the United States in the region. So they are eagerly looking for new economic partners and new investment partners, and this has driven a sea change in India's relations with Saudi Arabia, UAE and other powers of West Asia. This approach of India not only guarantees its energy security, but it also attracts massive investments from these countries into India's infrastructure sector. The oil-rich kingdoms of Saudi Arabia and UAE, even they are looking for new markets to invest in, and India represents a very lucrative opportunity. That's the reason why both Saudi Arabia and UAE have promised to make billions of dollars in investment, especially in the oil and refining sector, and Saudi Arabia is looking to sponsor a construction of a massive refining facility at Ratnagiri, and both the countries have promised to ensure a seamless supply to India's strategic petroleum reserves. In return, these countries have started showing greater cooperation with India with regard to the security domain, especially with regard to role of Pakistan in using West Asian countries as a base for sponsoring terrorism against India. Over the last few years, there has been great security cooperation and intelligence exchange between India, Saudi Arabia and UAE, which has directly contributed to the busting of a number of terror modules based out of West Asia. Then with Israel, India's security and defense cooperation has increased further over the last few years. And even though India maintains a principled stand on the Palestine issue, it has continued to forge a strategic relationship with Israel. Whereas with Iran, India's primary focus was on strategic infrastructure projects such as the Chabahar port project and other critical connectivity projects which would help India connect not just with Afghanistan but also with Central Asia and Eurasia. But India's balanced outreach towards Iran has been severely compromised over the last few years because of Trump's policy towards Iran. The decision of Donald Trump to unilaterally quit the Iran nuclear deal and reimpose US sanctions against Iran has hampered India's economic and strategic cooperation with Iran, and India is still struggling to find a way to balance this relationship. Similarly, China's approach towards West Asia as well has seen a major policy shift. Traditionally, China was looking to promote passive peace, and it was looking to promote peace through development in West Asia, and it was not getting directly involved in any of the conflicts and rivalries in the region. But the rising tensions between US and China and the emergence of a new Cold War between the two superpowers has pushed China to pursue an ambitious objective of establishing itself as an alternative power in West Asia to the United States. Next, on page number 6, we have an editorial that deals with the retention of Pakistan on the FATF's grey list. But we have already covered this topic in complete detail on the 24th of October, and I would expect you to go through this article, which states that Pakistan has little option but to complete its FATF mandated tasks in the coming months. Now let's take up the practice questions for today. Which institution provides for tsunami early warning in India? The correct answer is option D, INCOIS. The Indian National Centre for Ocean Information Services under the Ministry of Earth Sciences, that is based out of Hyderabad, is responsible for providing early warning with regard to tsunamis in the Indian Ocean region. The next question, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission or IOC, which assists governments to address their individual and collective ocean and coastal management needs, belongs to which global organization? The correct answer is option B, UNESCO. See, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission was established in 1960 by UNESCO, and it plays a key role in assisting governments to address their individual and collective need with regard to ocean and coastal management through the sharing of scientific knowledge and information and as well as technology, and helps in promoting capacity building and as well as coastal research. This commission of the UNESCO consists of around 147 member states, and it happens to be the only UN body that specializes in oceanic science and research. As a part of its mandate, this commission of UNESCO focuses on oceanic science, observations, data exchange, and it also provides services such as global tsunami warning systems. It works closely with global conventions such as the Climate Change Convention, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the Rio +20 Summit, and it is seen to be actively promoting the concept of sustainable development with regard to our coastal economy. In the interest of promoting ocean sustainability, it works with many other institutions and conventions such as CBD, UN Oceans, the World Ocean Assessment, etc. These two questions were asked because this article on page number 8 makes a reference to INCOIS and as well as to the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of the UNESCO. According to this article, INCOIS has made tremendous progress since the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, and today it has established a very effective early warning system that can detect earthquakes, especially underwater earthquakes across the IOR region, and provide real-time warning not just to India but to all the countries in the Indian Ocean rim. By deploying a variety of sensors across the Indian Ocean region, INCOIS today is in a position to accurately detect underwater earthquakes and the possible occurrence of a tsunami, and by working with other institutions such as ISRO, IMD, etc., it disseminates real-time alerts to concerned authorities such as the NDMA, the Ministry of Home Affairs, and more importantly to the district authorities. This has allowed India's coastal villages to become tsunami ready, and it has significantly improved India's disaster preparedness and disaster risk reduction with regard to tsunamis. Now let's take up the next question. India's first seaplane service has been launched in which state or union territory? The correct answer is option B, Gujarat. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 10, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi is expected to inaugurate the first seaplane service of India, which will primarily facilitate tourists by operating between the Sabarmati riverfront in Ahmedabad and the Statue of Unity by using a seaplane that India has procured from Maldives. Now let's take up the next question. Which of the following statements are incorrect? The Border Roads Organization or BRO develops and maintains road networks in India's remote border areas and as well as in friendly neighboring countries. This statement is correct because the BRO develops roads, bridges and even tunnels along the remote border areas of India facing Pakistan, China, Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar, etc. And it has also successfully executed projects in friendly neighboring countries such as Nepal, Bhutan, Myanmar and Afghanistan. The second statement says that it functions under the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. This statement is incorrect because the BRO functions under the Ministry of Defence. See, earlier, this organization, which was largely manned by army engineers, was funded by the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. But later, considering the strategic significance of BRO, it has been entirely brought under the MOD. So the correct answer is option B, 2 only, because the question is asking you to identify the incorrect statement. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 10, the Indian Army is conducting a thorough review of the border situation with China in the Ladakh region, and it is evaluating its readiness for a prolonged winter deployment. And this article makes a reference to the Border Roads Organization. Now let's take up the next question. With which country has India signed an agreement to jointly develop transport infrastructure facilities on the strategic Assumption Island? The correct answer is option C, Seychelles. Please look at this map. This is where the Assumption Island is located. This island belongs to Seychelles, and in 2015, when Prime Minister Modi paid a historic visit to Indian Ocean countries, Seychelles had agreed to lease Assumption Island to India so that India could develop transport infrastructure facilities on the island. During the same visit, Mauritius also handed over an island known as the Agalega Islands in the Indian Ocean. Strategic experts believed that India would use this opportunity to build naval and military facilities on the Assumption Island of Seychelles and on the Agalega Islands of Mauritius, in order to directly challenge the rising maritime influence of the PLA Navy of China in the Indian Ocean region with the support of the US, which operates a major naval base at the Diego Garcia Island. But this deal of India with Seychelles had run into a controversy because of local opposition, especially by the opposition parties. And according to this article on page number 13, in the latest presidential elections of Seychelles, opposition leader Wawal Ram Kalawan, who is of Indian origin, has been elected, and it is to be seen how the future of India's involvement on the Assumption Island will be determined by the new Seychelles government. Now let's take up the next question. Which of the following are the functions performed by OPEC? Coordinate and unify the petroleum policies of its member countries, determine oil production levels amongst the member countries, fix global prices by regulating supply, ensure the stabilization of oil markets. All the four are correct, so option D is the right answer. Because these four functions are actually interlinked, and the OPEC behaves like a cartel under which major oil producers come together to determine oil prices by regulating production and supply, and they seek to coordinate and unify their petroleum policies and to stabilize the global oil markets. This question has been asked because on page number 14 there are two articles that make a reference to OPEC. According to this article, OPEC is hopeful that the fresh lockdowns being imposed in Europe as a result of the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic will not reduce global energy demand. And in this article, Indian Prime Minister has expressed concern about the volatility in global oil prices, and he has called upon global energy producers who are part of the OPEC to pursue a more responsible pricing policy that doesn't create volatility in the oil markets. Now let's take up a practice question from the 2018 prelims paper. Consider the following phenomena. Light is affected by gravity. The universe is constantly expanding. Matter warps its surrounding space-time. Which of the above are the predictions of Albert Einstein's general theory of relativity, often discussed in media? The correct answer is option D, 1, 2 and 3. Finally, let's take up a couple of mains practice questions. The first question, write a detailed note on the 4 foundational agreements of the US and how India would benefit from them. The second question, the engagement by India and China in the West Asia region is a good example of their metamorphosing approaches. So carry out a discussion in the context of this statement. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers in the comment section below. So this concludes our discussion for the day. Thanks for watching.